Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Felix Schuermann. So he's coming from Google. So he's a senior HPC technologist from Google Cloud HPC team. He is also an adjunct professor at EPFL. So his primary work, his current focus is on enabling HPC in cloud for science, engineering, and large-scale AI ML. Before Google, he was a co-director of EPFL's Blue Brain project, the digital brain twins across several generations of supercomputers. He has a background in neuromorphic hardware. That's super exciting, interesting. And he will be talking about scaling scientific discovery, accelerating how scaling scientific discovery accelerates the discovery loop. Felix, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you all feel like me that we had an exciting couple of days. I think there's a lot of energy in HPC thanks to AI and all the things we can do with it. And I'll try to share a little bit why I think it's a great time to be alive as a scientist and as a technologist. So this is actually my 20th ISC. So I remember having been here 20 years ago and actually spoken about the Blue Brain project. And at the time, we were still, I think, at least in the neuroscience community, having to make the case that simulation is actually a pillar of science. And so at the time, we were saying our experimentalists do the wet lab work. We have mathematical formulations for the electrophysiology or chemical interactions, but really we needed the simulation to treat the complexity of the biological tissue. And at the time, of course, big data, we called it big data to say, okay, and there are all these amounts of data, and we can actually learn something from this data by just looking at the data. We don't have to do additional experimentation to do that. So this is the world, how we saw it maybe 20 years ago. And since then, I could, for my own work, witness how Moore's law and how the evolution of the technology helped us to do more. And so this is 2 publications that came out of the work before I joined Google, where we were building very detailed simulation models of the biophysical properties of a brain tissue, modeling different types of neurons, modeling their dendrites, and so on. And from 2006 to 2026, we could grow the types of models in complexity by over 120-fold. And in a way, that was possible because, of course, we learned how to process the data, how to make more experiment, but it really was possible due to the computing power that we were writing. So essentially, the progress of the computing power literally took us along for doing more of the modeling we wanted to do. So this was a success story, but interestingly, there's a couple of problems where throwing compute at didn't get us that far. And predicting protein structures was one of those things. On the one hand, experimentally, it is extremely expensive to actually characterize the structure of a protein, because you have to sort of extract the protein, bring it into a form that essentially it's amenable to experimental visualization, and then you actually have to interpret the data. And this all led to the point that despite many decades of trying to understand proteins, there were only so many protein structures known. And as a computational scientist, it kind of was not very satisfying, because you say, hey, it is atoms that have forces to each other. Why can't we use computation to predict the 3D structures? And it just turned out that folding is a process that takes quite some time, and the numerical resolution you need to actually correctly advance this process in a simulation has such a small time step, because all the possible forces between these atoms with long-ranging forces and so on, that computationally we didn't get very far. It was a hard problem that despite several orders of magnitude of acceleration of compute, we actually didn't make much progress of it. And then AlphaFold came about. So our colleagues from DeepMind said, okay, can I do something else? Can I essentially use the known structures that there are and learn with a neural network of how to predict the 3D structure, and essentially shortcutting a biophysical simulation and shortcutting or jump-starting from the experimental data that they have. And so there's multiple generations of AlphaFold, and the first one was a neural network to actually predict distances. It didn't yet predict the 3D structure, and then they entered the CASP competition and already blew every sort of computationally known approach out of the water. And then AlphaFold 2, which actually predicted 3D structure, was the one which eventually they received the Nobel Prize for in a relatively short amount of time, because it made a problem that was previously computationally not really tractable. They pretty much were able to predict a large number of protein structures and sort of shortcut the computational path, if you wish. And just for completeness, so AlphaFold 3 came afterwards and sort of didn't add necessarily more accuracy on the prediction of 3D structures that AlphaFold 2 could already predict, but it actually included protein-protein interactions, protein-DNA interactions, protein-RNA interactions, and a lot of protein-ligand interactions, all these processes that are useful and necessary for drug targets. And so that was another leap forward. Now, I'm using AlphaFold as an example of how, again, as a computational scientist, building a computational model on our theoretical description of the physics that are happening. Again, some of these models are now entering the stage that they can be as precise as some of our numerical simulations, but compute the results differently. And AlphaFold 3 is one of the examples. WeatherNext is another one coming out of Google DeepMind, where we can have accurate predictions of weather, sometimes more accurate than some of our direct numerical simulations. And in some cases, essentially, we don't have the same resolution. So I'm not saying that this replaces the numerical simulations. I'm just saying we're seeing other paths to the predictions that we have been doing in this community. And there's AlphaGenome, there's a couple of other, I would call them bespoke science AI models. They're not LLMs, they're essentially learning the physics and learning to predict how the physics is playing out over time. So with that, I think if I was looking back at this picture of sort of having experimentation theory and simulation, probably AI is kind of replacing big data, that nobody anymore looks at big data without AI. And I would include to this that sort of we can now mine a lot of data. We've heard about the simulation, that sort of we have AI looking at the simulation results and then taking actions. I'll come back to that. But sort of we have AI looking at data, but we also have bespoke AI models like an AlphaFold, like an AlphaGenome, or others that help us to compute and predict results and advance our understanding. And Demis Hassabis, for example, would then also is a strong believer that we need AI to actually make the type of progress to understand biology that we need to address the big questions in this field. And now enter the agentic era. I'm kind of taking us through this because I want to show the different innovations that happen in these different things. So we have bespoke AI models, and now we have text understanding models, LLMs, which we've also seen, where you can now interact about your problem in free text and get text back. And then we gave them RAGs to look up current information. And we give them actions to actually do something with this information. And now you have an agent, and now you can combine these agents with additional mechanisms, like, for example, running an agent in a loop. And this is another type of capabilities that I think are extremely exciting for the scientific discovery and the engineering, the development of engineering problems. So here I'm showing you a schema of something which we call AlphaEvolve. This is research for us, and essentially what this is, think of it, it's an optimization algorithm, an evolutionary optimization algorithm. I'm sure that in this audience, many of you have been working with optimization one way or the other, maybe genetic algorithms, swarm optimization, you name it. In this case, we actually use an LLM agent to rewrite my initial program. So you start with something that is code. It could be a piece of software. It could be a configuration file. And you give this piece of code to an LLM and say, can you find a better version of this? And better you define by giving it a formal evaluation function, something that can compute whether the proposed solution is working and whether it is better or not. So it allows the agentic loop to say, this one is better than the other one, so let's continue with it. So what you're essentially doing here is you, as a human, can define the what. So you set the evaluation criterion, you provide an initial solution, and you might provide additional feedback or background on sort of what type of algorithm you might be looking for, or sort of where the agentic loop might want to take some inspiration from. And then the harness, in this case, will take your initial program, and it will go out and look interesting. So it might recognize what type of algorithm it is. It might read a research paper. It might essentially look at other types of codes. And it will create a new variant of the program. And then it will use its the formal evaluation function that you've provided to actually see whether the new solution is better. So how that actually looks like is it's different to typical evolutionary algorithm where you kind of say the algorithm can modify this and this and this and this variable. In this case, the algorithm, the agentic harness can actually rewrite the entire algorithm, right? It is moving out pieces. It might essentially take a paper inspiration and sort of use a different, I don't know, take inspiration from another field of science, and it will propose and continue to evaluate this loop. And what is interesting about that is that it actually, in the end, can explain to you the steps it sort of made of sort of what made essentially one solution be better than the other, and what was this additional jump in performance, where it's coming from. So it gives you an account of sort of what type of methods it used and sort of what type of inspiration of algorithms it used to essentially optimize your initial program. And yeah, you could say, okay, interesting optimizations we've done before. What is stunning about this is the impact that this made in a very short time for us and for other of our collaboration partners. So at Google, we use this to optimize our underlying scheduler, which schedules pretty much all of the compute in Google across our Google YouTube or Maps or something, other Google services that you might use, and Google Cloud, so the underlying scheduler that orchestrates our resources. And due to the scale of that, you can imagine that we've invested a lot of time in that scheduler to make it as efficient as possible. And AlphaFold, when we gave it the schedule logic as the initial program, it almost improved the scheduling by 1%, which is a big deal at the scale that we are. We could show also that we could apply AlphaFold to chip design to do something which, in a way, is bread and butter of our chip designs today when we design TPUs or GPUs, matrix multiplication algorithms. And so again, because they are so central, a lot of effort goes into them, but it could find a more power efficient circuit that is now made it into our GPUs forward, right? So we could, on a number of engineering challenges where a lot of engineers look at, we actually were able to show improvements. And it goes on. We have shown this for LLM training and inference on math problems. And if you see the link at the bottom here, we have seen more than 20 different types of categories and classes of problems where we've made substantial progress. So, and the interesting thing is what it really does is that it can take inspiration. It can read the literature. It can read literatures from accompanying fields or different fields and bring these ideas back to your optimization problem. And that essentially, it can explain it. And now we see how you can imagine product development or solution of scientific problems being leveraging this LLM in a loop and sort of it having a tool to, in this case, evaluate the solutions it's proposing. And now we're getting to adding additional agents to the picture. And in a way, in the previous talk, we already heard that, but I hope it's essential to say physics, AI, bespoke models. Now we have agentic AI systems that do certain things in a loop and through that can iterate. And now we're going into multi-agentic systems. And here we're describing, the visuals is a little bit light gray. So we're trying to apply this to whether we can come up with new hypotheses or ideas of how we can solve certain problems. So once more, the human defines the goal. The LLM agent might generate an idea, or we might ask multiple agents to generate different ideas. You do a review of these, or let the agents review each other, and then you compare, make a ranking, what comes out of it. But so different from AlphaFold, where essentially it is one type of agent that comes with new ideas, and the ranking is a formal evaluation. In this case, you let the agents rank themselves. So the idea here is, how do you do that, right? I mean, if one agent writes a research proposal for an idea, you need a reviewer, you need a review agent to do that. And you let these agents be debating their ideas. And one agent says, hey, in order to find a semiconductor material to create blue LED lights, which is living longer, essentially one algorithm says, oh, this is how you do that. And the other agent might say, no, this is not possible. I can show you the paper that shows that this is actually not a stable way of doing it, right? So you allow agents to explore diverse ideas, and you bring them back to debate their respective results. And our colleagues in DeepMind, they took inspiration from chess tournaments of how you determine who's the best chess player. But if you won against that person, well, your ranking is better than those respective persons. So literally, that is in the framework here. In addition, there are different agentic personalities. So this chart here is the schematic taken from the co-scientist paper published in Nature this year, and the colors here show you on the one hand what the scientist is providing, in this case the research goal. You describe which directions you want to go. You might give it additional data that your lab produced. So we're using here now the combination of an LLM, frontier LLM model that can be grounded on the type of papers or the type of data that you have. You add the idea, you add requirements and say it needs to be a novel idea, or essentially it must not infringe a patent, or it has to be safe for biological, biocompatible, or other things. And the parts in light red here is now the multi-agent system that the co-scientist is using. So it creates a research plan, then agents generate the actual idea, and then have sub-agents that sort of can do literature exploration. They can simulate a scientific debate. They make sure that you have diversity of the ideas. You can then think about, if two agents debated, sort of how you should take some of the ideas in order to create new new dimensions or new refined research proposals, and so on. And what you see in gray is actually this really leverages the fact that the agent has tools. And the tools may be doing literature research, but the tools may be doing database queries to existing biological or whatever, I mean, structure databases or you name it, or actually to simulate and launch a simulation themselves. And of course, it needs to have some memory. So what I find exciting about this from a scientist perspective is the idea that I have a co-scientist that can help me according to my ideas, my plans, my specifications, to go out and work out additional ideas and then come back after some time with a ranking of ways that it finds sort of that have survived the ranking process. And it can use the tools that I would use as a human, but the agents now can use it to actually advance their respective proposals forward. So if you, this is how the architecture in a way looks like. And from a technologist point of view, what I find interesting is the fact that this really is bridging the boundaries of, or bringing to bear all the type of technological components that I've been using as a scientist with on-prem resources, and now working for Google Cloud, so the type of resources we have as in a cloud hyperscaler. And so in a way, if I look at it from what is the technical components we need to map these type of co-scientists to, is you need a cognitive core, so you need an LLM that has a good reasoning capability. A large context window is very helpful because, of course, it means more of the literature, more of the context more of the grounding you have, it can use. And if you're doing this in industry, you also want to make sure that if you ground it on your data, that it needs to be giving you all the guarantees that it doesn't, so if your data doesn't leave the virtual boundary that you've drawn. You need data grounding. That makes it sort of using experiences that you made in your lab or in your research department. You have specialized agents, you have adapters, using schedulers, using databases, using potentially actual automated experiments, right? There is no real reason why this only needs to be virtual execution or why this couldn't be actually running experiments. And under the hood of all of that, well, you need the means to execute the AI inference case in this case. And there can be a lot. Think about it, if you send out 1,000 agents to do literature search, to have debate, the number of AI inference calls you do there is big, and how should I say, variable. So it's not sort of a constant thing, but essentially there's moments of more intense inference calls than others. The tools may be invoking HPC simulations, and many of the agents, even for database search, might need sandboxes, and you need to have a lot of easy CPU sandboxes to spin up to give the agents the tools. And I think elasticity of this here really is critical because it is not a constant type of simulation that we're seeing. So from a technologist point of view, I find this super exciting because it brings all the things that I've been working on in terms of HPC, in terms of elasticity, cloud, enterprise-ready data together to fuel this future. Or future, actually, the presence, right? What I've showed you here are published articles and capabilities that will be coming into your hands. So the way I look at it now is that we still have experimentation theory, simulation, and bespoke AI, but really what is happening is that now the agentic AI is orchestrating how and when, and we should be calling on the different capabilities to advance our science, and the human is more directing or deciding the goal, giving feedback, and essentially is empowered to test potentially more theories than you previously were able to pursue. This is super fast moving. If I will look at my talk today, next time at ISC, probably I will say, man, why did I give this talk? Essentially, it's probably we will have advanced a lot more, because this is not just me feeling like that the half-life of these types of ideas is very short. There's rapid development. So we created a community, a Google Cloud Advanced Computing community, where we discuss these type of topics and try to bring diverse views from simulation, from industry, and AI research together, and to keep us informed and essentially enjoy the times we're living in. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Felix. Time for questions. Please come to the mic or post the questions in the chat. I will quickly see if there are questions. If there's no questions in the chat, so please feel free to come to the mic. So Felix, excellent presentation. I have a lot of questions. So let me start with one thing, right? So the way that this field is moving, right? Anything that we can do digitally, right? So in the sense, inside a computer, looks like we can accelerate at a tremendous rate. Then the bottleneck is going to be the experimentation, right? Taking that, go to the real world, and do that, execute that, and see whether it's materials or protein design, and see whether it works. So what are your thoughts on accelerating that part? What we need to do to accelerate the experimental side?
Well, I think there are different ideas, I would say. One, of course, is if you do more targeted experiments and you have sort of less noise in things you pursue, maybe you can prioritize the capacity of experiments to the things that have more likely good outcome. So I think that is probably the first factor. There's a lot of, I think, ideas and talk in the community to automate the lab and sort of have larger scale labs that actually have some sort of an API where you can queue your experiment that you want to be done, and then either a robotic implementation of a lab or also the humans in the loop might essentially do experiments that can be ordered by an agent. So in a way, you make the physical experiment something that you can sort of trigger and then get the results back. But of course, the loop and the feedback of that might take longer. But so, no, I mean, I think absolutely we need anything which we do in the virtual things and simulations, or most of the things we do want to ultimately test in the real world, and I think that doesn't go away. And then again, when we do nuclear stockpile stewardship, right, we also don't have to test the physical things anymore because we actually reasonably convinced that showing it in simulation is actually predicting the right result. So there will be a mix of all of that.
Hello, thank you for the talk. This is Rosa Badia from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. I've read your paper because I need to give a speech in the fall about HPC, AI, and different aspects, and your paper was part of the inspiration for this talk, no? And in this talk, there will be people from scientists in general, it will be people from history, life science, right, and also politicians, no? And if it were you that had to give this talk, how you will present so people are not scared, no? Because sometimes that when I have to talk about AI in communities, this type of communities, they are really scared, no? One thing is the afraid of getting loss of control, no? That you lose the control when you delegate all this in the agents, but also will these agents hallucinate, no? I don't know, there are many aspects. If you can briefly let me know your thoughts.
Thanks for the tough questions. So thanks. I'm a believer in science. So I think if we have a means to do more science, I think we have enough problems in this world that need a good scientifically based answer. Anything from climate change to crisis in antibiotics resistance or whatever it is. So I think fundamentally, I think there's a very, very positive message. If we can do more science and faster, I think that's great. Of course, the autonomous question is one where I think we have to understand how we, when do we actually have a human in the loop and say, this is literally at the end of the day, the action that should be taken. So I think I've glossed over that a little bit. And so I guess anybody who is running large-scale infrastructure or who has to pay the bill for running experiments, you might have to have an agent or a human that has cost control and sort of is the final decider. So I think I didn't cover that, but I would say that this doesn't mean that we lose control. It's probably a dimension that sort of separately, in the context where you're saying, Rosa, you might want to talk more about that this isn't sort of an automatism to the end of the world, but essentially we are still in control of adding the control into certain actions before they get executed.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I will hold both the speakers here, so please come here and ask your questions. Felix, thank you so much, and please join me in thanking both the terrific speakers, and thank you.